Hi, my name is Derek O'Brien. I'm the Head of Marketing for Meridian Global Services. Today I'm going to be talking about the tax implications if you're selling cross-border in an e-commerce platform.
Just to give you some background about Meridian, because some of you may not know us or may not know exactly what it is that we do. We're a global business and we have about 500 people globally based in offices across Europe, North and South America, Russia and Asia. And what we do is we help companies who want to do business cross-border, and we help navigate through all of the VAT issues that they come up against. Now, traditionally, we deal with multinationals in manufacturing and so on, but over the last 5 to 8 years, we've actually developed quite a specific expertise in helping e-commerce companies in cross-border trade. We deal with large multinationals and SMEs as well, so it's a broad spectrum. We've lots of different industry types in lots of different countries. And we're 23 years in existence, so we've built up an awful lot of experience. In this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. How true it is, and it's still true. And for you guys especially, and when you look at the data that came through on the report, e-commerce and cross-border trade in e-commerce can't be ignored. You're not new, you're not a fad anymore. You're a huge industry now. And the amount of money that's passing through is getting an awful lot of attention from a tax perspective. What I'm going to do is run through the VAT and sales tax perspective and the findings that came out of the report. So I'm not going to tell you how to sell lots more, and I'm not going to tell you how to do A/B testing or use marketplaces and so on. I'm going to concentrate specifically on the perspective of tax and sales tax and VAT. So we looked at the potential growth opportunities and whether you're passive, active or agile, which are phrases you may have heard already. I've brought them directly from Channel Advisor. Overcoming the challenges and taking the right route. There's some very simple and specific things that you can do to make sure that you don't build up a risk. And then how retailers can get better at what they're doing. And then where to go and not to go from a tax perspective unless you're absolutely ready. So, to a large extent, you're already out there selling cross-border. 67% of the respondents actually said that they're already selling cross-border. And it's large and small companies alike. And we're seeing that coming through ourselves. About 70% of the businesses that we're actually helping to manage their VAT compliance in e-commerce are small and medium-sized businesses. And it's not untypical for them to be selling into 15 to 20 different jurisdictions and for us to be managing the registrations across all those jurisdictions for them. So large and small companies, you have an equal opportunity to actually access this potential. Where and how they actually access those markets, to a large extent, a lot of the small companies tend to be passive in that they're listing their products and the customers are finding them initially. So they're finding that they're getting orders in from different countries. I listened to an interview recently of a lady who was describing her first exploration into cross-border trade, and her first order from outside of Ireland where she was based came from Singapore. She didn't do anything to go get it. They found her. And about 38% came through in the survey as being passively. That's how they're starting off. They're seeing the business coming through to them. Then the larger organisations, and we're seeing this ourselves as well, tend to be more active, investigating the markets, looking at the market potential, the size and so on, how they're going to access those markets. What we see as well is that those that start off passively very quickly move into a more active approach because they see where the best countries are for them that are coming to find them, and then they start to investigate it a bit further. And normally what we would see is that a company may start off with 1 or 2 registrations like the Germany or the France, and then very quickly they'll start to add on the Netherlands, Denmark, Luxembourg, and so on and so on and so on. And ramping up the number of registrations that they have can actually happen quite quickly. Then into the agile, and this is where e-commerce is really maturing, and we're starting to see something happen, is it's becoming far more complex. So having your own site, selling, delivering from your own location, it's relatively simple, even when you get into distance selling. But when you start to bring in same-day delivery, next-day delivery, click and collect and so on, the whole logistics network in the background that's operating to support that can actually create really complex VAT scenarios. And e-commerce companies are now beginning to look a lot more like industrial companies that we've been dealing with. you need to keep a really close eye on what's happening with your stock when you start to mature and get into a more agile type of environment, because it's where your stock moves from and to, who's buying it and who's owning it and who's selling it determines what you do with the VAT and what your reporting obligations are. The thing that came through to me the most actually was less the quantitative stuff that came out of the report, more the qualitative from the case studies and the interviews that Liz did. And this supported, again, an awful lot of what we see, in that every single individual company is different. And they will put together a specific set of processes. They'll access different countries. They'll use marketplaces. Some of them won't use marketplaces. Some of them use affiliate marketing and so on. And they all have their own individual scenario. And from a VAT perspective, it's important that you understand what your scenario is, because if you take an off-the-shelf phrase from somebody else who seems to be doing the same thing as you are, and they say, yeah, we don't have to charge VAT, it's all covered, don't risk it. Understand your own scenario, work it out, know what to look for, and then verify it. 93% in the survey said that international expansion was important or vital strategic priority for them. If that's true, the one thing that you cannot ignore, because it's an obligation, you don't have a choice, is the tax. I know I'm sounding like a bit of a downer here and everybody, but believe me, I'm doing it for your own good. Don't ignore it. It doesn't take that much to actually find out what you need to know and how to go about making sure that you're okay. But the one thing that we will always say is check and make sure. Don't ignore it. If you kick the can down the road, it's not like if somebody finds you all of a sudden from the German authorities that they go, okay, you haven't been doing it right, but don't worry, we'll look after you now. They will retrospectively assess you. So what you've done in the past will catch up on you. So if you believe that you might be doing something in another country where there's a tax implication, check it out. Costs nothing to check it out and make sure that you're okay, because you don't want that can blowing up in your face after you've kicked it down the road for 2 or 3 years. So what are the challenges? 2 things that came through loud and clear in the challenges in the report were language and cultural differences, and there was quotes from people where they actually were saying employ people that are from the markets that you're moving into, because they'll have the cultural insight to know how people buy in those places, what are the natural holiday sequences and so on, things like that. And then just being able to use the right language. And VAT came through as an issue as well for those that actually even realised that it was an issue. The one thing that I'd just say on the language and the cultural differences that actually comes true from a VAT perspective as well is that language is key. We actually had this is something that happened last Thursday. We got a call. It was with one of the guys in Dublin. We actually got a call from a guy selling jewellery online. And he's selling into about 4 or 5 different countries across Europe. And 2 years ago, he got a letter from the Italian authorities. He got it translated. He answered it. He sent it back. He heard nothing more. So I hope there's nobody Italian in the room, but I'm going to say something a little bit. But the Italians don't move that quick. So 2 years later, he thought, sure, I didn't hear anything back. It's fine, no problem. Then through his local return, he actually got a request for his Italian VAT registration number and his French VAT registration number, wanting to know where they were, through his local taxing authority. He had never even had a communication with the French. And this actually demonstrates something that's happening more and more and more. There's an awful lot more crossover of information among the authorities. They've actually got a mechanism in place to speed that up and make it easier now. So if you think that you're in the UK and you're selling into Hungary or into Germany or into France or into Spain, and they're not going to notice, and sure, how will they come get you? It's the EU, it's a single European market, and it's too big to ignore. You're responsible for too much tax take, and they all want to make sure that they're collecting their element of that tax. 67% said that they were already selling cross-border. The scary things that came out were that over half still said that they were investigating how to handle their VAT compliance. This wasn't actually that surprising for us, because that's what comes through an awful lot. People tend to sell first and then think about the VAT later. that's natural. And to be honest, in all of our other business that we do with multinationals as well, they usually do the same thing as well. It's a natural thing, and you're extremely busy people. You can see that just from the amount of things that get thrown up of marketplaces, comparison shopping sites, accessing, finding your own stock. You've got a lot on your plate already. And believe me, VAT is not the most exciting subject in the world. If you want anything to put you to sleep in bed at night, I can provide you with plenty of material. And I actually came from a retail background myself. I don't know how I ended up in VAT. I was 13 years in retail, and it's I'm glad to be coming back to it a bit. It's a bit more exciting. Even among the 14% who said that they had a high level of awareness, they still find the VAT compliance difficult. And again, that's no surprise really, because it's a complex area. You're dealing with different languages, and they're constantly changing rates, rules, policies, and so on. We have 500 people in our organisation, and a huge proportion of them spend their time keeping up to date with what's going on so that we know what to do. So there's a quote later on, I think it was the very last sentence of the report, and I can't remember it exactly off the top of my head, but it'll come up on another slide. If you can't do it quickly and efficiently yourself, outsource it. If you need to do it, get somebody else who can do it, because trying to work it out yourself, you'll make yourself miserable, your head will hurt, you'll spend a lot of money, and you'll probably get it wrong. So the risk, like I said, e-commerce is no longer a fad, and we have a bit of a thing about thrill-seeking goldfish in Meridian, but it's nothing to do with VAT. The values involved in cross-border can't be ignored, and that's really, really coming true. We're seeing that in our own engagement with the tax authorities and even at a EU Commission level. The Commission actually want to facilitate cross-border e-commerce. They really want to make it happen. But at the same time, there is this compelling thing where they have to collect the tax, and each country wants to collect their portion of it. And what's happening is that the tax authorities are actually putting specific units in place within the authorities to track down cross-border trade e-commerce. They're even doing ghost purchasing, where they're going onto your sites and they're buying product to see, are you actually treating the tax correctly? So you're online now, you're probably easier to find and track than businesses ever have been before, and they're out there looking for it as well. This was another quote from within it as well. I think it was True Shopping said this. They do 80 returns a year, and many retailers ignore this and end up regretting it. I could write a book with the amount of stories that we've heard. We've had a guy who's selling over €1 million worth of skating products into Germany, and this is a key thing as well. He actually contacted a help desk. I won't say which one, but it was an official help desk asking, should I be charging a different rate of VAT here? Because this seems an awful lot of money to be selling into Germany and for me to continue charging UK VAT. And they said, no, you're okay, continue charging UK VAT. It was absolutely 110% wrong. We're now actually trying to help him to unravel that mess that is there. And the problem there is that he was being a good corporate citizen as such. He was collecting UK VAT all along and handing it over. Now he faces the issue of actually trying to get that VAT back from the UK authorities to hand it over to the German authorities. And that doesn't always happen in sequence, so you can run into cash flow issues. And the other issue that arises is that there's a variance in the rates that apply across the EU. So in Hungary, God help them, they have to pay 27% VAT. If you're selling into Hungary and you've been charging 20% VAT, you're going to have to make up that shortfall yourself. Told you it was a bit of a downer, but I'm going to end on a high, I promise. I can just see everybody's face just dropping. I'm beginning to feel bad up here. So how to actually make sure that you don't end up in a bad situation. There's 3 things that we'd say to think about and remember. One is identify the countries that you're selling into. So look at where you're selling, look how much you're selling, and know what the thresholds are of its distance sales. Verify whether or not you actually have an obligation. Now, we've got content, and we do a lot with Channel Advisor, and we do some stuff with Digital River as well and some others. So we're trying to get the message out there, and the content is out there for you to look at the thresholds and see what the thresholds are exactly. The verification, if you believe that you've exceeded a threshold, you can contact us and we'll tell you very quickly whether or not you have an obligation. It'll be a very quick call, bang, you're done, yes you do, or no you don't. And if you do have an obligation, comply immediately. Don't wait, don't hang around. You're just kicking the can down the road. To identify what you need to know, there's, like I said, the distance selling thresholds, and that applies specifically to European sales. And they tend to fall into two thresholds. It's either 35,000 euros or 100,000 euros, or the equivalent in the currency conversion. You can hit 35,000 very, very quickly. And the countries where 35,000 apply, I haven't memorized them, but we've got a list and I'll give it to you if you really want it. The 100,000, the likes of the UK is 100,000, I know off the top of my head. But these are the things that you need to track. And if you're selling high value goods, you'll hit 100,000 in no time whatsoever. You need to act very quickly and make sure that you've complied. You also need to look at what VAT you're charging. And we've had some conversations, and myself and Jordan were having a conversation, Jordan from Channel Advisor, about where some people don't actually charge the VAT. They put up the value and then they're not charging the VAT. And I've even heard of a shoe company who actually put up the same value across all of their sites, and then they reverse calculate the VAT out. There's big variations in the VAT rates. So if you can handle that in your margin, well and good. But otherwise, make sure that you know what VAT rate to be charging and on what products, because if you're zero rated in the UK on a certain product, doesn't mean it's zero rated in another country. And then you could be, I think there was one where it was a helmet. I've actually got a colleague here, so he's just going to hang his head in shame when I get this wrong. But it's cycling helmets. I think in Germany are considered safety equipment, so they're zero rated, and in the UK they're considered clothing, so they're 20%, right? All right, I got it wrong. I got the idea right, but the rate's wrong. The other thing to remember when you're identifying is the location of your stock before you even sell something. This is really, really key, because one of the great innovations that's come out with is the fulfillment side of things and FBA and so on. If you own the stock and it moves to another country, you have a reporting requirement before you've even sold it to a customer. So when your stock moves, you need to report that. You have EC sales and Intrastats reportings, potentially. You need to look at your individual scenarios. As soon as you make the sale in that domestic country, then the distance selling thresholds go out the window. You're making a domestic sale, so you'd probably need to start charging German or French VAT immediately. But again, ask the questions, we'll verify for you. The rules in each jurisdiction are constantly changing, and one jurisdiction that came up as being the second most popular as such to go after is the US. And this is something that I'm actually really confused, and I don't know whether it's just the visibility that we have. We actually see an awful lot of US businesses coming over and selling into Europe, and we're assisting them. We do not see half as much going the other direction, and it's a massive market. And the tax situation over there is actually quite advanced in that there's an awful lot of automation to it and so on. But there is a major change coming. And even if you're not located in the US, there's a threshold. I think it's nothing's finally decided, but if you sell more than $1 million worth of stock into the US, you may have to charge sales tax in each of the jurisdictions in the US. And there's not just 50 jurisdictions. I think it's 9,000 or 11,000 taxing jurisdictions in the US. There's a lot of software out there to help you charge the correct tax, but you'll also have to remit in all of those different jurisdictions as well. So if you're looking to go into the US, don't ignore the tax situation again. Verify. So once you've identified, verify, and verify through a trusted source. It can be us, or there's lots of others out there as well. But verify that you have an obligation. You may not. And you may even be able to get some advice as to don't do it this way, do it this way, and then you won't have as much of a burden. And then comply straight away. Do not kick that can down the road. And there's that quote. If you can do it well or quickly, If you can't do it well or quickly, outsource it. You can tell I'm not in sales. So getting better, and this is the high note. This is as high as I can get it, I'm afraid. Take advantage of all these opportunities. There's a massive amount of opportunity. Just the amount that we're seeing coming through in the businesses that we're dealing with. And UK businesses are really in a great position here because, to a large extent, apart from anything else, your first language is English. You post your sites up in English. It's probably the one language that most other countries can probably manage to work their way through and buy something from you. Now, the downside to that is that every other country is going to be looking at you guys for their tax take. But there's a huge opportunity to grab out there, and it definitely appears from everything that we're seeing as well, it's open to large, small, medium, and micro businesses. Cross-border trade is now a reality for everybody. You can use all of the tools available to you, and there's lots of them, and they just seem to be evolving all the time. But make sure that you understand the country specifics. Now, lots of other people will tell you about how to make sure the languages and make sure the culture and so on. From our perspective, it's just three things. Identify, verify, comply. Just think those things every time you look at another country. Know where your product is, where it's moving to, and who it's being sold to, and where it's being delivered to. It's absolutely critical that you know that and understand it, because you will be found, because there's a paper trail for all of those movements. Just asking yourself the VAT or sales tax question for every new country that you sell into, if you actually do that every time, you'd probably be 10 steps ahead of an awful lot of multinationals, because they usually ask it. The first thing that triggers them asking the question is when they try and raise an invoice, because they've gone off and they've structured a deal, they've signed the contracts and everything, and then somebody comes in and says, hang on, we have to raise an invoice for this. What VAT rate should we be charging? You may not have the luxury of having a VAT manager or a tax department. So if you're asking yourself those questions, you're actually going to be ahead of the game to a large extent. And don't kick the can down the road. Where to go and where not to go, again, from a tax perspective. The EU should be fairly straightforward for anybody based in the UK to go into from a tax perspective. North America, USA and Canada, the same. Australia, Japan, Korea, South Africa are all fairly straightforward from a tax perspective to get into. When you start getting into the BRIC countries, they are exciting. There's an awful lot of comment on them and everything. They start to get very complex, and what we'd say is that, not that you shouldn't go there, but make sure that you have all your ducks in order and that you've investigated it well before you actually delve into it, because unraveling a mess in there could actually turn out to be a real nightmare. The end.